Good evening. This is Pale Criminal. As promised, I am going to be speaking tonight on political correctness. My focus on this concept is due to the tendency of our society to moderate language so that people cannot be offended. While I acknowledge that there are many people in our society who hold beliefs not merely offensive, but in many cases criminal, moderating language and topics of discussion so as to protect our population from anything that might be offensive, I contend, is counterproductive. I would rather suffer some uncomfortable language than remove subjects from debate. I just want to start with the subjective connotation concept. First of all, political correctness has been a label that's been aimed at political rivals since as early as the 1960s and 70s. At that point, left-wing activists used it as an attack on those opposed to socialist or left-wing views, quoting at the time things like, "not very politically correct, comrade." Later on, we had right-wing conservatives using the term as an attack on the egalitarian movements that sought to remove racist, sexist terms from popular language. In both cases, the user of the term was attempting to demonstrate that their opponent was incorrect, not because of what they were saying, but because what they were saying was politically motivated. The reality is that any politically motivated move to restrict language is opposed to the search for truth. I guess the next thing I really want to talk about would be what I like to label as language police. Our society seems to have a concern with correct word use, and I use the quotations for the term correct, uh, suggesting that specific word use is detrimental to the overall understanding of truth. Um, Frankly, there's a lot of words that have negative connotations. Over generations, those connotations change. As an example, one close to home, I guess, uh, the average height of a North American male is approximately not 5'9". So, as a male that's 5'2", I'm short. I've heard countless comments and jokes concerned with my stature, uh, most of which were tasteless and demeaning, really. Uh, but I still choose whether I am truly offended or not. Uh, I usually come out with comments like, "That's not original." I've heard that. Uh, on the other hand, uh, a variety of studies have shown that height can be a determining factor in many employment situations. Uh, if you're above the average height, you stand a better chance of moving up within most employment structures than if you're below the average height. Now, frankly, being labeled short as opposed to the politically correct term, vertically challenged, will not have any direct effect on this actuality. But a discussion of the issue can be impaired by the word choice. What I want to do really is to change the argument. My concern with policies that restrict word use is that they are attempting to make political changes through the words that we use rather than by direct attack on the policies that they oppose. An argument can be made that words have more authority to hurt than actions, But I really think that they only have the power to injure that we give them. If a word is said to be offensive, then part of its ability to offend is derived from that declaration. Short is a dimension, as a for instance. It's not subjectively demeaning. Its use could be, but it doesn't have to be. On the other hand, focus on word usage can really restrict the ability of making any real change in our society. Returning again to my example, stopping people from using the term short may restrict how often somebody can be offended by the use of that word, but it has no real effect on my employment situation. We spend a lot of energy trying to remove the potential to offend, but we're really not changing the general perceptions. I'm just going to take a step back and look at the foundations of the ideal. Really was post-structuralists, I guess that's the label they like to use anyway, that originated the argument that our language is the first place in which one can identify political oppression. The argument is that by restricting language, they can restrict those people, those actions that seek to oppress selected groups. If we remove words from our language that have been deemed derogatory or offensive, then we'll create a society that's more egalitarian. On the other hand, opponents often argue that this is merely an attempt to penalize dissent and stigmatize individuals with what amounts to social heresy. If you use certain words, then you can be ostracized because it's offensive. At the end of the day, my argument is that language will not determine how I am received, and whether you call me short or vertically challenged will not affect how you perceive me. On the other hand, saying that I'm short rather than tall does determine something about my stature. Vertically challenged, very honestly, could apply to either height extreme, dependent on the circumstances. If you're in a space that's only 6.5 feet in height, being tall is going to be rather challenging to walking around in that space. Being short actually is going to make it simple. Reality is language should be viewed as a means to accurately relate information. And I would argue that we need to remove political motivation from word choice. There's a difference between hateful speech and accurate speech. And we should be able to consciously determine that difference. Saying that people can't or shouldn't have to really is taking a pretty large chunk of responsibility out of the hands of people. And I don't agree with that. Now, at the end of the day, any attempt to control word choice is a form of social bullying and does not generate a positive change that validates its negative effects. Taking certain words out of the language might stop people from using them. It's not going to stop how they feel. And, at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about. If we're talking about offending someone, they'll find another word. At one point, the word idiot was the label for a certain group of people at a level of mentality. Later became retarded or mentally retarded, that was deemed to be offensive as well. So then they went to a mentally challenged sort of thing. I think the most offensive word in the English language is handicapable. It means nothing, really, at the end of the day. If you're handicapped in some way, then there's a barrier between you and the action that you want to take. Handicap capable doesn't mean anything, I guess is where I'm going with that. Now, while I will agree that some people use language to achieve political agendas that are not respectable, certainly any one of us can come up with at least one example in the news in the last week. I will continue to argue that restricting our word use does not achieve a positive effect. And at the end of the day, our society believes in free speech. One of the primary rights that have been declared universally, originally by a fellow up in Hampton area. This is the guy that documented it anyways, for the United Nations. We really need to focus on that. I'm going to say stuff that you're not going to like. Maybe I already have. I'm okay with that. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I can't guarantee that I won't. And I guess Voltaire really said it best. I do not agree with what you have to say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. What I'm after here is to take restrictions out of our language, to remove the connotations from certain words that automatically dictate the person using them as bad. I think really that's more of a politically motivated statement than any that I'm going to make with word choice. That's really where I was going with this for tonight. I don't know that I've covered everything that I intended to. Sort of just threw this idea together. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. And I'm going to shut her off for right now, and we'll take a look at what another subject will be for the first of the week. Thank you and good night.